this week. US same-sex marriage changes reverberate around the world. The Pope apologises to descendants of persecuted Waldenses. And homeless haircuts make a difference in Perth.
This is InFocus Christian News and Current Affairs.
Hello, it's great to be with you again, and let me tell you, you are in for a fantastic half hour here on InFocus. Not only are you going to meet an incredible lady with an intriguing story of how God led her through her Buddhist grandmother, not only are you going to hear impassioned and in-depth political commentary from Canberra, and learn from Sue Rad that turmeric is so much more than a yellow powder, you also get to hear the news read by our very own Sibel Coutet. Where's my drum roll, Sibel?
I'm sure our viewers by now are very impressed, Kent,
Of course.
Wondering where the steak knives are.
Well, of course, we're currently in very high-level negotiations with the good folks at Donoz Direct to see if we can get a good deal on that. Are you ready for the news?
If you're quite finished.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. A US Supreme Court decision has ruled that laws limiting marriage to heterosexual couples are unconstitutional. The ruling, which effectively legalised same-sex marriage throughout the United States, has prompted celebrations from gay rights activists. A number of church groups, however, have expressed their concern that just one vote in the 5-4 decision of the Supreme Court justices has trumped the democratic rights of the 31 states, whose elected representatives previously voted against same-sex marriage. Catholic, Baptist, Adventist and other church leaders say they'll continue to support biblical marriage. The next challenge for religious groups will be the level of legal protection for pastors, priests and others who, for reasons of conscience, do not want to participate in same-sex weddings. The debate over same-sex marriage is also continuing in Australia, with the Catholic Archdiocese of Sydney targeting businesses that have publicly expressed their support for a change to the definition of marriage. The Australian Marriage Equality Organisation has been coordinating a campaign encouraging businesses to speak up in favour of same-sex marriage. But according to the Gay News Network, a number of the businesses have received a letter from the Sydney Archdiocese reminding them of a significant number of Catholics who do business with them and suggesting that they have overstepped the mark in participating in a political campaign. Attacks by ISIS militants and their sympathisers in Tunisia, Kuwait and France have left dozens dead, hundreds injured and thousands in shock and mourning. According to CNN, some terrorism experts say the shootings and bombings are a response to IS calls for attacks during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. The religious motivations of the terror movement have been highlighted by the bombing of a Shia mosque in Kuwait, which killed 25. And in Jerusalem, a leaflet claiming to be from a local branch of ISIS has threatened local Christians with death if they do not leave the city by the end of Ramadan. According to Haaretz, church leaders doubt the authenticity of the leaflet and say it may be intended to distract from a recent church arson attack in Galilee, which appears to be the work of Jewish extremists. Pope Francis has continued to surprise supporters and critics alike, this time by making an historic personal apology to the descendants of Christians persecuted for centuries as heretics. Beginning in France in the 12th century, the Waldenses lived in voluntary poverty, believed in the priesthood of all believers, kept the seventh-day Sabbath, and evangelized using Bibles in their own language. The movement was nearly crushed by successive waves of persecution, but the Waldensian Church has continued to the present day. Attending a Waldensian church in Italy, Pope Francis asked forgiveness for the Catholic Church's unchristian and inhuman attitudes and behaviour and upheld the unity of all those who believe in Jesus. In the final days before the Adventist Church faces a vote on the issue of women's ordination, one of the denomination's most prominent evangelists has spoken out in favour of maintaining the status quo. In a series of 2 videos, Doug Batchelor argues from the Bible and Adventist church history why ordination should be reserved for men. He also points to the experience of 5 US churches which experienced decline after extending ordination to women pastors.
If history's any guide, voting in favor of women's ordination shattered the mission, theology, and unity of these major denominations.
Delegates of the Seventh-day Adventist Church from around the world are gathering this week in San Antonio, Texas, for the 5 yearly General Conference meetings. Television viewers in Papua New Guinea will soon be seeing gospel messages on free-to-air TV. A formal agreement has been struck between communications company Media New Guinea and the Seventh-day Adventist Church to set aside a time slot for spiritual and lifestyle programming every Saturday morning. Broadcasters say they're keen for other churches to make their contribution too.
Media New Guinea Limited believes that strengthening the work and mission of churches through television is a guaranteed way of reaching the masses with messages of life and messages of hope.
A new charity has launched in Perth, Western Australia, with the aim of providing a free service to the homeless and disadvantaged that's a cut above. Short Back and Sidewalks says a haircut provides a much-needed boost in confidence and gives the opportunity for some much-needed positive human contact. Short Back and Sidewalks is being supported by a number of established welfare agencies, including the Salvation Army, Uniting Care and St Bartholomew's House. The organisers are excited by the responses they've had. They say they're looking for volunteer barbers across Australia who get a buzz out of lending a hand. And that's this week's news. It's a great story, isn't it, Kent?
Yeah.
How a simple haircut can make a difference.
Yeah, it is great. Let's hope it catches on. Hey, stay with us. Politics in Focus coming up straight after the break.
Travel back in time to ancient civilizations through this bi-monthly magazine, Archaeological Diggings. This month, Diggings goes inside the amazing burial mound at Amphipolis in Greece, a site to rival the tomb of King Tut. But who is buried there? We look at the claim that Jesus' bodily remains have been unearthed, along with those of his family. And we also bring you the latest news from the fascinating world of archaeology. Don't miss an issue. Subscribe online or ask for Archaeological Diggings at your local newsagent.
Welcome back, and it's great to have with us on the line from Canberra, Martin Isles from the Australian Christian Lobby. How are you, Martin?
G'day, Kent. I'm really well, thank you. Good to be with you today.
Now, Martin, this move of the Supreme Court in the United States towards same-sex marriage has electrified the debate again here in Australia, just like we saw after the Irish referendum. Is the tide of history moving against Tony Abbott and his traditional marriage colleagues on this issue?
Well, it's an interesting way to put it, Kent. History's a very, very long time, and I'm not sure if 10, 15, 20 years on the end defines history. It was Justice Kennedy himself who, during the hearings process of the case, said that it was unclear to him why, after millennia of successful man-woman marriage, the binding together of a mother and a father for the sake of rearing their children, we claim to know better in the modern age in the very short space of time. And he expressed some scepticism about that. And also one of the other dissenting justices said in his judgment that it's really unclear what the long-term consequences of this are going to be, because it's actually never really been done before for a sufficiently long period of time. So if you look at it that way and you see that this is, 10, 15, 20 years on the end of many millennia of history, and not only that, but it's a small number of countries, just the Western countries, out of approximately 200 across the world, I'm not sure whether history is on the same-sex marriage side or the pro-traditional marriage side. I suspect actually it's on the side of traditional marriage.
Okay. I guess nevertheless, though, it seems that emotions are running pretty high in Australia in some quarters. Something that worries me a bit is what we heard in the news bulletin earlier. Apparently Catholic leaders in Sydney are putting pressure on private businesses and encouraging them to stay out of the political arena on this issue. Are those the kind of tactics that you would endorse, whether it's this issue or any controversial issue?
Well, the way I understood what the Catholics had done was that they went into the public square and they made 2 points. The first one was whether corporations are best placed to comment on issues like marriage and family. And the second one they did was actually take the reasons in favour of marriage to the corporates and give them an opportunity to respond. And I think that you need to make your case for being in the public square. It's one thing to use corporate money to put a glossy logo on an advertisement in The Australian. It's another thing to actually respond, point for point in a reasonable, rational way to the arguments in favour of preserving marriage. And I think if the Catholics have achieved that, then that's a really constructive thing to do. And I would encourage them to continue to do that.
Okay. Well, thanks for your time today, Martin.
Thank you, Ken.
And now it's over to James Toogood, Sue Rad and Food in Focus.
Yeah, look, it's amazing. Sue, to think from the land of India and the ancient Orient, we have this exotic spice, turmeric. It's just fantastic. And it prevents Alzheimer's. Sue Rad, tell us about it.
Hi, James. How are you?
You got yellow on you now.
Turmeric is totally anti-inflammatory and antioxidant, and this is one of the most important mechanisms to prevent in the brain if you want to slow down cognitive impairment. They're also studying it for a range of other diseases. So, for example, cancer, they've now discovered there are more than 100 ways that turmeric blocks cancer.
Yes, and it works across the whole...
Well, one of the studies, in fact, that Dan Buettner quotes in his Blue Zones book is a study that's shown that turmeric is 1/5 as potent as cisplatin, which is a potent chemotherapy drug. But
and
besides
he's the longevity
cancer,
specialist.
Well, he's really into researching longevity populations around the world. But even diabetes. So there was an interesting study in Thailand, and it showed that people who were given curcumin supplements, and that's one of the key phytonutrients in turmeric, for 9 months, everyone who took the curcumin supplements prevented the onset of diabetes, whereas if you weren't taking the curcumin, you had a high chance of getting diabetes.
So it prevents the onset, helps progression.
Yes, and even if you are an older person who has diabetes, they've now shown in Taiwan that if you use turmeric regularly, it helps with your brain function. So a particular type of memory called working memory, which is where you reason. So turmeric is really important from a cancer point of view, a diabetes point of view, and especially the more common, the more obvious inflammatory diseases like arthritis and inflammatory bowel disease. It's really, really medicinal.
What excited me was I want to keep my brain and my memory Alzheimer's. To think it helps. How much do you need and what kinds of turmeric do we have?
Well, traditionally and on average in India they would use up to about 3 grams a day, so that's roughly half a teaspoon.
Half a teaspoon? So I'll just hold this here so we can see.
But the most important message today that I'd like to give is just get it into your diet, and we're going to look at a few different ways. So this is the dried ground turmeric, but of course before we get that, this is what the raw turmeric looks like. It's a cousin of the ginger family. You can see how intensely orange it is in colour. And if you cut that, that orange colour will remain on your knife. So you have to wash it off very quickly. So it is potent in terms of its medicinal effects.
So they dry it and grind it and it's powder. Does it lose potency?
And no, it doesn't. It's quite stable. But there are 2 types of ground turmeric that I think that are of interest to note. The more common one, the bright yellow one, is called Madras. But if you're looking for the high end, the more medicinal one, you need to source one called Alapi. Alapi turmeric. It's got double the concentration of these curcumins in it, and that's a more brown coloured one. It's got a more intense flavour. So let's have a quick look at how you could use it.
Yes, okay.
So there's your cup of tea, James. Put a pinch of ground turmeric, just a pinch, end of a knife, and stir that, and have a little sip of that.
I'll put 2 pinches.
On the island of Okinawa in Japan, the centenarian women sip on tea all day long, and they add a pinch of turmeric to their tea.
That's so good.
But of course in India, do you like that? It is fine.
That's nice.
A teaspoon might be too much in that context, but it's amazing how much you can get into milk. And the flavour is undetectable. So this is something I made for you last night. This is warm. This is called golden milk in India, and they use it for when people have colds and chest infections, that kind of thing. And that has about half a teaspoon of turmeric.
That's the whole day's dose, from my memory.
In one glass. It's got some other spices as well, cardamom.
As usual, anything on SueRad.com just tastes fantastic.
And of course, let's not forget, if you're making rice, just add half a teaspoon per cup of rice in your rice cooker, and that's another way of getting turmeric in. And something else I've got for you to taste. A delicious dal where you can add curry powder or turmeric. And incidentally, curry powder.
Turmeric in it already?
This has turmeric and curry powder, but many people think of curry powder as having a lot of turmeric. It's actually a poor source of these curcumins. You need to get the real stuff, the turmeric. But have a try of that. It's an easy thing to make.
So the yellow comes from the turmeric?
You're having extra turmeric with your turmeric there. The key thing is just to get it in through your drinks.
Very good.
Whether it's smoothies with the fresh turmeric, in your rice, in vegetable dishes, in stews and curries, just eat it every day. It's potent stuff.
Well, I'm not going to join those little old ladies. I'm going to be a bloke. Cheers, guys. A turmeric drink. It's milk. It's beautiful.
And it's
what
delicious.
else? You put in cardamom? And...
Cardamom, other spices.
Signs of the Times, a magazine for a world on the brink. And this month in Signs, is there really a place reserved to burn sinners for eternity? Why your morning ritual may be negatively impacting your health. There are Facebook friends and then there are real-life friends. How the Magna Carta, signed 800 years ago, shaped our world today. All in this month's Signs of the Times. Subscribe to Signs today and change your life.
Hello, welcome back. Well, I'm starting to think that I must be dealing with a work of fiction here today, because we're talking about a book today called The Ugly Daughter, and which is clearly not about you, Julia Legian.
Thank you. That's me.
That's you. You're the ugly daughter.
I'm the ugly daughter.
I find that very hard to believe. Please explain.
You haven't seen my sisters.
Oh, okay.
They all look like supermodels. Yes. Yeah.
But your childhood was pretty rough, though, wasn't it? I've read your book, The Ugly Daughter. It is actually, it's not fiction. I'm joking. It's a true story and a harrowing, terrible story in some ways.
Yes.
Your parents were both quite abusive to you and your brothers and sisters.
It was tough to grow up with the parents that don't really want you, because my parents, older one is a little boy, and the reason they have 5 girls because they tried so hard to get a boy, and it doesn't really happen to me, but it happens to all my sisters too, and we all just come together and learn to deal with our parents, and whatever abuse that they given us, we just take it and just pray.
So you were growing up in Vietnam after the years of the Vietnam War.
Yes.
And the country was very poor. Your family was very poor.
Yes.
But when you speak about prayer, it was your grandmother that taught you to pray.
That's
wasn't
right.
she? But she was Buddhist, wasn't she? So how did that work?
Well, my grandmother, in my opinion, she's a living Buddha, because she's a very compassionate woman, and she doesn't discriminate. And basically, she's a Buddhist, but she also explained it to me that Buddhism is a way of life. It's not a religion. And she only believes in one God. And there's only one God in this world, and that's what we should look up to, and that's what we should believe into. And so during the first 7 years of my life, and I'm very grateful that my parents actually left me with my grandmother, because during that time, she taught me a few really invaluable life lessons, and that is, love, compassion, faith, and also forgiveness. And during that time, I get to learn all this. And so when she returned me to my parents, I kind of used these lessons.
You had a foundation built there in your heart of a prayer and more positive. Because she was the one who told you were special, and maybe you never heard it from your parents, but you heard it from your grandmother.
That's right. It's every day. That's what she tells me, I'm special, and she called me her little princess. And she always reminds me that my purpose in life is to go out there and to serve others. So she always reminded me that whatever happened to me during the time I lived with my parents, I have to remember that it's just a test from God, and to see if I'm worthy of His work, and I have to live my life as an example.
Do you consider yourself a Christian? I mean, you believe in God, you pray, but you're not. Are you not a Christian? Or you are a Christian? Can you explain this to me?
I could say that I'm in between. I'm a little bit of Buddhist and a little, Christian, but I'm more leaning toward the Christian. The reason, because, like what I said, my grandmother explained it very clearly as a child, that Buddhism is just a way of life, and it's more about us learning to practice, compassion, and to help others and to serve others. And there's a Christian world, which is God, and there's only one God. And when we in trouble with our life, we just only look up to one God. So basically, I can say that deep down in my heart, I'm a Christian, but I'm also, you know...
But you have that Buddhist background and upbringing, it doesn't let go easily,
That's
does
right,
it?
yeah.
And there's a lot of value there. I understand what you're saying. Like, as I was reading through your book, I could see again and again there were some pretty intense spiritual experiences that, you know, that you lived through, things that you saw.
Throughout my whole childhood, I always see things and hear things and also witness in real life that, you know, oh, this curse. And it's also happened to one of our family members, which is my sister.
Yeah.
And she almost died. And because my dad, he's, you know, Christian and he doesn't believe in any of these things. And when my grandmother told him that my sister been cursed and there's a demon possessing her and he didn't believe her. So for the whole entire 3 years, that grandmother tried so desperately to save my sister and want to take her to see a, you could say, witch doctor and remove the curse. And Dad totally refused it and didn't let her until my sister, at the last breath, on her last breath, that just about, my parents just about to put her in the coffin, that's when Dad actually agreed to let my grandmother took my sister's body and took her to see the witch doctor and remove the curse. And she's now still alive and, you know.
So I guess for, you know, for Christians watching this, that's a pretty challenging sort of story, but it's the reality of what you went through.
That's right.
But also through your life, you've seen God come through for you again and again, like guiding your life. Can you tell us maybe just a couple of those key moments?
Yeah. So my whole entire life up till now, I believe that if it wasn't for God, I wouldn't be here today anyway. And the whole life is just like a mini series, you know, of miracles for me. And I remember the first time that when I was a child and I wanted to go and see a cartoon called Little Mermaid. But when I finished the movie, I realized that it's quite dark and there was no way I could walk back home.
You were a long way from home too.
Yeah, a long way from home, probably about more than half a day walk. And during that time, my country also at war with the Khmer Rouge, and a lot of kids and all that had been slaughtered. And I heard all this story, you know, they tear them apart while they're still alive and smash them against the wall and all this thing. And here I am, you know, I have fear kicking in, and I was severely, you know, it's pretty much paralyzed with fear. And so I just collapsed down on the road and I started to pray. It's about 10 minutes later, there was this man on a motorbike and he just stopped right in front of me, and he actually was my first cousin, which someone that I didn't know and I never met before. And that was my first experience with God, you know.
I've heard you talk about, you said you had an experience that you say it transformed you and you're never the same after that. What's that experience?
Probably when I reached about 14, 15 years old, because my life was so much tougher then, and the abuse is more severe. And so during that time, up to I was about 19 years old, I totally closed my door on God. And I was so upset with him, and I was angry with him, because I said that he abandoned me and he wasn't there for me anymore. So at some point I was suicidal. And a lot of time, you know, like every day I wake up, the first thought in my mind is how I'm gonna die. I'm gonna kill myself today. Which way can I kill myself and make it more, you know, less painless for me? But at some time I just had enough, and I just cry and I cry and I cry, and I just fell down on the floor and I just cried for I don't know how many hours. And then at that moment I actually realized that how ungrateful I was to God, because I realized that if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have lived up to, you know, that moment. So I closed my eyes and I said sorry to him, and I told him that I was an ungrateful child. And
I think this is what we call repentance.
I was so ungrateful, and, you know, I'm sorry that I shut my door on him, and I really needed him now, and I wanted him to come back into my life. And so while I was laying on the floor, closed my eye, crying my head off, I saw this curtain of light, like a massive, imagine it's just like your whole entire life being covered by a dark cloud. And all of a sudden now you have a tiny opening with this light, you know, slightly descended down. And it just went slowly down and down, down, and until it's penetrated into every single cell of my body.
Wow.
And at that moment, I felt so light, actually lifeless. I still can feel myself laying on the floor, but it was weightless, you know, and I feel so light, and I feel so happy. All of a sudden, I was bursting out of tears, and I with laughter,
but happy tears this time.
Happy tears and laughter, and I didn't know why. So from that moment, all of a sudden, I just feel like I was just being alive again. All this time, you know, for the past 30 years of my life, I felt like I was sleeping, just like sleepwalking. And until that light came into my body, all the trouble and everything just melted. It totally melted away.
Wow,
Yeah.
it sounds very much maybe like what a Christian might call a born-again sort of experience. So, wow, an incredible story, and that's an extra story. That's not in here, but that comes in volume two of the book, doesn't it? Which you're still working on.
Still working on.
But yeah, this is an incredible book. It will break your heart, but it will inspire you as well. And look, your journey's really interesting, and I can see that you are journeying towards God. He's touched your life in so many ways, and I'm really interested to hear, you know, how God continues to lead you in the future. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate that you allowed me to share my story with you today.
Thanks for being with me.
Thank you. I'm very grateful.
That was Julia Legian. Wow, what a story. We'll see you after the break.
Unearth ancient civilizations with archaeological diggings. This bi-monthly magazine will keep you up to date with news and insights from the fascinating world of archaeology. Subscribe online or ask for archaeological diggings at your newsagent.
Every week, It Is Written is available to millions of free-to-air viewers throughout Australia, New Zealand, New Guinea and the Pacific. It Is Written's Gary Kent regularly takes viewers to the far corners of the globe to report on new evidence and discoveries that confirm the Bible and Christian beliefs. It Is Written also provides medical care to remote Pacific Island communities. Join Gary Kent each week for It Is Written. See television guides in the It Is Written website for broadcast times. It Is Written with Gary Kent. It really is television that changes lives.
Hello, well it looks like our time is up, Kent.
Indeed it does. Thanks for your company. If you'd like to comment on anything you saw in today's program, please get in contact. Your options are email, Facebook or Twitter. The details are right there on your screen.
And our Hope Channel viewers won't find us at our usual time slot next weekend due to coverage of the Adventist Church's General Conference meetings. Check your program guide for details.
That's it from us this week. God willing, we'll see you next time on Record in Focus.
All the best.